So welcome to my YouTube channel. That's what we call The Good Life. Today we're going to be talking about when to pick your precious fruit and vegetables. I'm getting lots of people asking when things are ready and when can they pick them. Now, although there's lots of things that aren't ready at the moment, I'm going to kind of go around what I've got and when I would genuinely pick it and what I would expect it to look like, just to give you some general hints and tips. Now, if you've not already subscribed to my channel, if you could please do so, because you'll get lots of helpful hints and tips all throughout the year on my allotment, my home garden, and from time to time my home kitchen. Now, first of all, we're going to talk about the tomatoes. Now, they're quite obvious, to be fair. Now, while you can eat your tomatoes green, and they do in some countries, you're obviously waiting for them to turn red, or whatever colour they're going to be, whether they're red, orange or whatever, or yellow. And so they're obviously not ready. As soon as they turn red, that's a really easy one. You know you can take them off. With sweet peppers and chilli peppers, you can wait until they ripen, or you can pick them in their original colour. You know, if they grow green and then go red, or whatever type of chilli that you've got. It just all depends on what flavour you're going. If you want them to be a little bit sweeter, then obviously you let them ripen. But you can, with sweet peppers or chilli peppers, just pick them when they're the size that you want them to be, really, or let them mature and let them ripen. The choice is yours. Aubergines, you're not waiting, although I haven't got any aubergines yet, you're not waiting for aubergines to ripen. So all depending what variety you've chosen, you literally cut them at the size you want them. And if you want to cut one a little bit earlier, you can cut one a little bit earlier. But you are just waiting for them to be the size that they're meant to be, for whatever variety you've got, and then you can cut them off. Let's head into the greenhouse and look at the cucumbers. So head in here. So with cucumbers, again, you are not waiting for a cucumber to ripen. You pick it when it's roughly the right size for you. You obviously wouldn't pick it when it's too tiny, like that. I've got the lunchbox variety. Now, these are not far off being able to pick, but if I really wanted one of those now, I could take that off and eat it, but I'm going to let that get a little bit bigger. In fact, that one really isn't far off. I could take that one off now, actually. This is a lunchbox variety, so that's easily big enough, but I could let it get a little bit bigger. I wouldn't let it get too big because I want it to concentrate on producing more fruit, so I want lots of little ones. But obviously, if you were growing a different variety, like a telegraph variety, you'd obviously wait for it to get about the size that you would see one in the shops. Do you know what I mean? As we head over, I think strawberries is an obvious one. You wait for them to ripen before you take them off. I've got quite a few under here that are nearly done, but not quite. So I had a nice bag full the other day, or a nice bowl full, and they were absolutely lovely. So strawberries are an obvious one. You take them off when they're red, a bit like tomatoes. And with corn, these are the miniature variety, but with the normal corn, you wait until you can feel the end of the cob will go brown. That's not a sign that it's necessarily ready immediately. You also feel the cob to check whether you can feel the cob inside it. There's no hard and fast rules of knowing exactly when they're going to be ready, apart from the fact if they're ready, the badgers might have got them before you did. Sometimes you do just have to peel one open if you think they're about right. As you start doing things like that, you do get a feel for things like that when they're ready. French beans that I've got over there, I've only got a little bit of bloom at the moment, but again, you know, you're not waiting for it to ripen, you're just waiting for it to get to the size. So for any French beans or runner beans, you're waiting for them to get to the size that you want to eat them at, so the size you would see them in the supermarket. One thing to bear in mind with French beans and runner beans, you don't want them to go over, because if they go over, the beans inside the beans will start to swell out, and then that will send a message to the plant for it to produce seed, and then it will stop producing lots of lovely fresh beans. So with those, you want for them to get to the right size, but you want to get them off regularly so that they keep producing more and more beans. Now we're going to head up at the allotment, and I'm going to run through a few things up there to give you some idea of what you're looking for and when they're going to be ready for you to harvest. So we're now up the allotment, and I'm going to take you around to look at some of the things that I've got to show you when you can harvest them. If you think you're getting value from this video and you'd like to buy me a coffee, I'd be very grateful. There's a link up on the screen, and there will be one in the description. But if all you can do is subscribe, like and comment, I would still be more than grateful. So to start off up here, I've got my globe artichokes. I've actually harvested quite a lot of of mine off already. I've got one over the back there that you can see. Now you can harvest these at different times, all depending how you like them. I personally harvest them off a little bit sooner, so when they get a little bit bigger than the one up there, so kind of like a cross between the size of a golf ball and a tennis ball, so in between that, I normally cut mine off because I like to harvest them early and eat them tender. You can wait for them to get to about the size of a tennis ball when they just start to open, and that's the latest. If they open any more, then they'll be ruined. But the benefit of picking them a little bit smaller is you get like the little kind of like, I think they call it like the fur in the middle. If you harvest them sooner, you don't have to remove that. If you let them get to the size of a tennis ball, you have to take that middle bit out because it's not very nice to eat. So that's why I harvest them sooner, and I just strip off the outer leaves, cut them in half and just roast them in the oven, because it's a lot easier. But that's a little bit of a tip with those. With rhubarb, as soon as it's growing really quite well, now I've already had my big flourish of rhubarb early in the season, and it's now starting to hit its second flourish of rhubarb. Now I wouldn't pick too much off of it at this stage, but some of these bigger, thicker stems, I would just take those ones off. If you've only just planted your rhubarb, there's a lot of people that say that you mustn't harvest in the first year. Now for me, that would all depend how well it was growing. If it was growing as well as this is growing, again, I would just take a few stems off, but don't take too many off. But then I would never pick my rhubarb plant bare anyway. I would always just take out a few of the thicker stems and cook those. So if your rhubarb's not doing very well and it's not looking as good as that, I probably wouldn't take much off it, if anything at all. But I would definitely feel confident to take some of these thicker stems here. And I know some people say you should only pick at certain months of the year. As a general rule of thumb, if your rhubarb plant's looking good and you've got some nice big thick stems on there, I would definitely take a few, no matter what time of the year it was. I just would never ever pick it bare. Now with your apples and pears, now obviously mine are by no means ready yet. I've got lots of lovely apples on here. You know, when apples are ready to come off, they come off easily, so I'm not going to take any off now. And if you follow my channel, obviously I'll show you when I'm picking mine. If you can take them off easily and they just come off very easily, then they're ready. But if they're still quite firm on the plant like they are now, they're not ready to come off. Often a sign that they're ready is when you start to see a few more dropping off a bit later on in the season, and when obviously they're a lot bigger than that. But they're not ready at the moment, so I'll leave those on there. And same with the pears as well. They're not ready yet. These not quite the same. Again, normally the sign that they're ready is you start seeing the birds having a bit of a peck at them, and then you know it's time to get them off, because they're at their prime. But they obviously need to get a lot bigger. They don't have to come off quite so easily, because pears, apart from if you've got very few varieties ripen on the tree, they ripen off of the tree, so you're more waiting until they get to the size that you want them to get to, really. So those are too early to obviously come off. The raspberries, on the other hand, I've seen lots of people picking lots and lots of raspberries already. Mine aren't far enough on. I've had a couple, but not many. And the way to tell whether they're ready is obviously they need to be the right colour, and if they're ready, they will come off quite easily, like that. You know, if they're quite hard to pull off, then they're not ready. But if obviously they're the right raspberry colour and they come off quite easily in your hand, then they're ready to pick. I might have to eat that one now. Cherries are quite an obvious one when they've ripened. Blackberries are very similar to raspberries. When they come off easily, you know, obviously they've darkened up nicely, they come off quite easily, they're ready to harvest. It does all depend how sharp you like them. And if you're going to make preserves with them, you can pull them off a little bit sooner, because obviously you're going to cook them. So as we move down, gooseberries, as soon as they're a decent size, you can pull them off, or you can leave them on a little bit longer to ripen up. It's up to you. We've harvested this one, but we've got some more gooseberries down there which are ripening up a little bit more. So again, it all depends whether you like them a bit sweeter or a bit tartar. It really doesn't matter, it's completely up to you. And when they're the size you want them to be, just harvest them off. Onions. Now while you could pick an onion at any time, if you needed one, when they've stopped growing, they start to flop over like this. Can you see? And the top starts to die off. I'll wait until more of them are flopped over, but again, if I need one in the meantime, I'll pull these ones and start using them. You don't have to wait to dry them before you can use them. If you need one and it's the right size, these are my overwintering ones, and I've already started pulling a few of these as I need them. These are the ones that I put out in the spring. As you can see, the ones I've put out in the spring, I don't think any of them have flopped over yet, but I would expect them to probably flop over in July. But again, if I needed one in the meantime and it was a decent size like that one, I would just pull it out and I would just use it. But as a general rule of thumb, you leave them till they flop over, you dry them, and then you store them and eat them over the coming months. With your potatoes, you've got different types of potatoes. So you've got your earlies and your second earlies and your main crop. Now with your early potatoes and your second earlies, they grow a lot quicker. Now all depending on the situation, how much rain, you know, what the start of the season's been like, they can be as ready as early as 10 weeks. Now my new potatoes are ready so much earlier this year. That's one of the big bonuses with all this bad weather that we've had. We have had a lot of rain and I'm already digging my new potatoes. I don't think I've ever dug them quite so early. With new potatoes and second earlies, generally if they're a flowering variety, as soon as you start seeing blooms on there, it is a sign that they might be ready to dig. So just gently tease up the ground a little bit and have a look before you just go digging them all up. Obviously dig one up, see what it's like, or dig up a little bit, see if you can see some potatoes. That's what I did with my first one. They were ready to harvest, and I just harvest these as and when I want them. With the main crop, they can take more like 20 weeks, a heck of a lot longer to come to maturity. And with those, you're generally waiting, unless you've got a different variety, for the plant to actually start to die off. So that's the distinct difference between the early varieties and the later varieties. The early varieties, once you start seeing bloom, it's often the case that you've got potatoes underneath. If you have got main crop varieties, it's generally the case you have to wait for them to start to die off, and then you can start looking to see what you've got underneath. With all my potatoes, I generally dig them as I need them, apart from when it's getting later on in the season, and then I dig what I've got and then I store it, because the best place to store it is in the ground. But obviously later on in the year, when it starts to get colder and wetter, you know, the potatoes could deteriorate in the ground through just the weather, or through slugs or snails or other things attacking your plants. So I've got spring onions and fennel in here, and spring onions, you're literally just waiting for the spring onions to get to the size that you want them, you know, as you would normally just buy them. Fennel, obviously you're hoping that it will come out into a nice big bulb. Sometimes they really swell out really nicely and sometimes they don't. As long as it's a decent size, you can harvest it. You know, you're not waiting for it to ripen or do anything special. It just needs to get to the desired size, and you can harvest those. Blueberries, I think that's probably quite obvious. They need to get a little bit bluer than that. It's actually my first crop of blueberries, but as you can tell, these don't look anything like what a picked blueberry would look like, so they need to stay on there a little bit longer. As we move down, I've got a selection of pumpkins and squashes and courgettes. Now there is a big distinct difference between courgettes and squashes, in that a courgette, you literally just pick it when it's the size that you want it to be. So any of these can come off now. So lots of these that are on here, because they're courgettes, I pick them off when I need them, and I would generally pick them off. Definitely that one there can come off. I might let these ones get a little bit bigger, but you want to pick them off like you do beans, because you want it to produce more. If you start letting them get too big, they won't keep sending out new blooms to create more courgettes. So you pick them regularly. Like I said, you're not waiting for them to ripe, for them to do anything special. When they're the size you want, or you want to eat one, you just pick one. With squashes and pumpkins, now they are a different story altogether. You leave them on them to mature. You want them to ripen. So generally speaking, you wouldn't start harvesting until September to October time, and you'd want to take them off before the frosts kicked in, because it could harm them. You are definitely waiting for them to ripen. So your squashes and your pumpkins, they need to stay on there for as long as you can, because the longer they're on there, the better they taste. And we've covered beans already. Carrots, you are literally just waiting for them to get to the size you want. Mine aren't anywhere near ready, so it's not worth me even looking, but you can just move the top of the soil away, and if you can see the top of the carrot starting to form and it's getting to a decent size, you can start harvesting them. With beetroots, when they get to about the size of a golf ball, and you can let them get as big as a tennis ball. I wouldn't let them get any bigger than that, because they could start to get tough. With spinach, you just harvest it as and when you want to. As you can see, I've got a nice amount of spinach in there. I can quite easily start harvesting some of that as and when I want to. So I've got a selection of brassicas here, I've got some cabbages here. You wait for them to form hearts. Now again, you can start picking them a little bit earlier with a smaller heart, or you can wait to fill out. I wouldn't let them wait till they all get to the same size, because you'll have a load of cabbages at once. So sometimes what I do is I do start to pick some of them when they're a little bit smaller to spread the time over, because if you leave a cabbage in too long it can split. So there is obviously a balance of when you do pick the cabbages. Obviously I only just put them in so they're nowhere near ready. Kale, as soon as you've got some leaves on there you can start harvesting them off. Now unfortunately the slugs are harvesting my kale off a little bit too much at the moment. But you know, one like this one here, let me just lift this up because I'm going to do a bit of weeding in here later anyway. So one like that, you could easily take some of the outer leaves off of that and take a few. Personally, I'd like it to fill out a little bit more before I start taking the leaves off, because more and more leaves are going to come, and you just take the outer leaves out because more leaves come through the middle. So not long and I could probably start harvesting that kale. And I've got Calabrese broccoli over here. And again, you're waiting for obviously the main broccoli head to form. When it starts to almost rise out, that's when it's time to harvest. You might get big heads or small heads, but one top tip I would give you is I would just snap off that main head when I harvested it, and I wouldn't pull the plant off, because my experience of Calabrese broccoli, you get lots of shoots coming out the side, a little bit like purple sprouting. So I personally leave mine in for months after I've taken the main head off, because I continue to get more and more. So now let's head up to the rest of the allotment and we'll take a look at some of the things there. I've got my broad beans in here. Now the same thing applies whether it's broad beans or peas, to decide when they're ready to harvest. I've harvested an awful lot of mine, but what you're waiting for is you're waiting to be able to fill the pea or the bean in the pod. Now you can pick them a little bit earlier, but just make sure that when you squeeze that pod you can feel a bit of a bean or a pea in there. I quite like my broad beans a little bit earlier because they're a little bit more tender, so I don't wait for them always to be really bulging in the pod. Like that one, I can feel there's beans in there, so I could have that one off. I could let that fill out a little bit more, but they can get a little bit dry and starchy sometimes when you do that. So again, it all depends how you like your broad beans. And peas are exactly the same. If you've got peas, again, you want to be able to fill a pea in there, and then you harvest them and you start eating them. You're not waiting for them to dry off. You eat peas when the pod is green. Now, obviously if you're just growing mange twos and you're eating the whole pods, you literally pick them off as and when they're the size you want them to be. Again, you're not waiting for them to do anything special. You can eat them quite small if you want to, if you're just growing the ones just for their pods. So if we head up to the blackcurrants, and I think we're done. So we're now up to the blackcurrants. I cover my blackcurrants because the birds absolutely love them. I've got to say they are doing really well this year. My blackcurrants are bigger than usual, so this is one of the benefits of all the rain we've had. Now with blackcurrants, it's obvious, obviously, you need to wait till they go black. Now it does all depend how sharp you like them. Now I like mine quite, you know, blackcurranty and not too tart, so I leave mine on for a little bit longer. As a general rule of thumb, they will nearly all be ripe once I start testing them, and the way I test them is I literally taste one, and if it tastes quite blackcurranty and it comes off quite easily, they're ready to harvest, and I generally harvest them all over a couple of days. Which for me is a little bit like the man from Del Monte. When it tastes just right, I do very much harvest them then. So if you've enjoyed watching this video and you'd like more ideas of what you can sow and plant this year, this month there will be a link up on the screen and one in the description as well.